So good morning, and thank you for joining us today for Shasta-Cascade SBDC's webinar on Funding Your Big Idea, an overview of the SBIR and STTR programs. I'm Janelle Green, and I'm the lead economic development specialist of the Sacramento District Office of the SBA. And before I begin, I'd like to thank Shasta-Cascade SBDC for the opportunity to be here. So the SBA is a federal agency that's dedicated to supporting small businesses. And our Sacramento district office territory is actually pretty expansive. So we're based in Citrus Heights. However, we cover 22 counties, stretching all the way down to San Joaquin County, and then north to the Oregon border, covering the counties that are east of the coastal range. SBA is generally known for its programs related to capital access, federal contracting, technical assistance, and disaster relief. But however, SBA has a key role in facilitating the small business innovation research and small business technology transfer programs, which are known as SBIR and STTR. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to, in my brief introduction, just give you an overview of what we do as an agency to facilitate the program. Our major responsibilities include the following. So first is oversight. SBA monitors the agencies that participate in the program, develops policy, improves the quality of data. We also manage the SBIR.gov website and report on the program to Congress. We also work to build capacity for those SBIR support organizations. We do that through 2 different funding programs for those groups. And we also provide training for those organizations that are part of the innovation ecosystem within regions. And that can include state economic development departments, universities, accelerators, procurement technical assistance centers, and then SBA resource partners as well. And then finally, we also lead outreach and training on a federal level with other agencies. And we focus in particular on reaching underrepresented populations, and then just work to promote SBA as being the face of America's Seed Fund, which is the SBIR program. And so all of this work is carried out by a small team within SBA that is in the Office of Innovation and Technology. Next slide, please. So if you want to know more about what we do, you can go in the next slide. I have contacts. You can go to our website at sbir.gov. I'd also like to welcome you to visit our Sacramento District Office website. We have a calendar of no-cost trainings that our district office staff and SBA resource partners deliver for small businesses, and that includes SBA programs and information on small business management topics that can span from digital marketing to business planning, things of that nature. And so I welcome you to visit there. You can also subscribe to our newsletter via our website. So just hope that can be a helpful resource for you. And I also just want to call out that the PDF version of this slide deck and the slides shown by others is going to be sent to attendees after the presentation. So this is going to bring my introduction to a close. But I'd now like to thank again Shasta-Cascade for the opportunity to be here, and then introduce Charles Eason, who's going to provide an overview of the SBIR program. Charles serves as the SBIR STTR advisor at the Northern California SBDC Tech Futures Group, and he has deep expertise in both programs and has provided training and counseling to thousands of entrepreneurs. So thanks, Charles, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. Thank you for being here as well. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to share with you a quick overview of the SBIR and STTR program. I've been a big fan of the program, which allows small businesses to obtain up to like $1.5 million in non-dilutive federal funding to help them commercialize new innovations. But before I jump into my overview, just wanted to share and mention that I'm one of the small business innovation and research advisors with Tech Futures Group. And we also have another one on today. Sturat Berkowitz is another one of our SBIR advisors who's on with us today. But Tech Futures Group is a specialty program within the Northern California Small Business Development Center network. And we're funded by the SBA and also through the Governor's Office for Business and Economic Development, GoBiz here. And we don't take any equity or cash for our advising services, so there's no cost for our advising services. They're available, no charge, but it's a great program, and we help a lot of the technology companies here in the Northern California region. A little bit about myself. I was first exposed to the SBIR STTR program back in 1995. I had been working for the aerospace industry for about 5 years. I worked with TRW, the ballistic missile program down in Southern California at Norton Air Force Base there. This was back kind of right after Reagan and the Bush years. But then after we won the Cold War, we didn't continue the buildup of nuclear missile systems, so a lot of us were laid off in the early 90s. And in fact, Norton Air Force Base, where I'd worked at, was closed in one of the base realignment closures. It was kind of a ghost town all around the base once it closed. So they wanted to get things going again with a business incubator there. So I actually wrote the business plan for the incubator and ended up becoming the incubator manager. But we had a lot of these laid off engineers who were still hanging out in the area there. And one of our actual first tenant in the incubator was another TRW engineer, bright guy from Caltech, and he had just received what's called a Phase 1 award, and I'll describe the different phases in a minute of the program. But he received a Phase 1 through the Army White Sands Test Range, is developing this software when you shoot down a missile plane, kind of a free fly zone. He had himself and about 2 or 3 part-time people when he moved into the incubator. And then I helped him write what's called his Phase 2 grant, and he was successful in getting that and became our first graduate out of the incubator. Went on to win multiple SBIR awards and grew his company to about 90 employees. So I've seen this over and over again. I've been doing counseling and training for about 26 years now. Moved up here to Northern California, continue doing it, but seen this where small companies with 1, 2, 3 person operations get some SBIR funding, and it helps them launch their company. And I've also been through the process myself with I had a National Science Foundation Phase 1, Phase 2 grant. We were basically doing 3D printing of houses. There's a technology called ShapeMaker. It's kind of a, I guess, rapid prototyping technology. We take any 3D CAD model and create an object the size of the house. So you can see here, we have this 3D model, this Buddha. This is a 25-foot tall model built with this layers of foam that we kept with a 4-axis water jet. See Dr. Thomas standing right here is my co-PI on the project. There's not a big market for these 25-foot Buddhas. I've actually got 2 of these. One's down in Santa Cruz in this temple, all spray painted gold. But my concept was applied to the construction industry. So in Phase 1, we built a 1/12 scale model of my house here in Green Valley, and then we did a curved staircase. And then in Phase 2, we did a full scale structure and then a curved floating staircase. So that was a little bit of my experience with the program. Now, the purpose of the SBIR program, it's been around since the early 80s, but the purpose is to kind of stimulate technological innovation and tap into small businesses to help solve some of the federal research and development needs, and also to foster that innovation and entrepreneurship by women, socially and economically disadvantaged persons as well. And the ultimate goal is to commercialize these innovations. So we want them to be, it could be something that was developed with federal research and development or technologies that small companies are actually developing. So there are, one of the nice things about the program too, even though the federal government is funding the R&D efforts through the SBIR program, you as a small business retain worldwide patent rights to whatever you're developing. The government does have a non-transferable license they maintain, and they could potentially, I guess, force you to commercialize it if you didn't commercialize it. If there's like national emergency, they have what they call march-in rights, but I never seen anything where the government's come over and taken over your IP, so that's not something that really to worry about. And the data is also protected too from disclosure, so the agencies have to keep your information confidential when you submit a proposal. So just submitting a SBIR proposal is not a public disclosure of the information, so you can mark the information as proprietary and confidential. Now there's 11 agencies that participate in the program. So Congress requires that the agencies set aside 3.2% of their extramural R&D budget for the SBIR program. So agencies that have I think it's $100 million or above are required to do that. So there's 11 agencies that participate. And then agencies would have like a $1 billion or more R&D budget, then they also have to participate in the STTR Small Business Technology Transfer Program, and I'll explain the difference between those two in a minute here. So you see there's top 5, the bigger agencies do participate in both the programs. So there's about $3 billion available. That 3.2% works out to about $3 billion available every year. I know here in California, I think we get probably about 500 some phase 1 awards. And if you look at a pie chart of the kind of where the funding goes, you see the DoD, of course, has the largest R&D budget. So when you take 3.2% of that, then they have the largest SBIR part of the budget. And then NIH, National Institutes of Health, has another quarter of the pie there. So between those 2 agencies, there's about 3/4 of the pie. And then that last quarter goes to other agencies, Department of Energy, NASA, NSF, and then the smaller agencies like Department of Education or USDA, or the kind of smaller slivers there. One thing I always like to point out, you see here the green for grants and blue for contracts. So they have what they call granting agencies and contracting agencies. And in both cases, you get the funding from the government and you don't have to pay it back, even if you fail to commercialize or fail to demonstrate feasibility. They just use a different mechanism. So the granting agencies like the National Science Foundation or the National Institutes of Health, they have very broad topics that you can try to fit under, and you get to propose both the problem and the solution. So it's up to you to figure out what that problem is and what the solution is. Whereas the contracting agencies like DoD or NASA, they have very specific problems they're looking to solve. So when you look at their topics, they're very specific. So they propose the problem, you propose the solution. And of course, they also like to see that there's other commercial applications, like the DOE, what we call dual use, so that they know they're not the only ones investing in the technology innovation. But first, you have to solve their problem, and then you can show that there's other commercial applications for that. So just want to point that out. If you're applying, that's something to think about when you're applying to the agencies. They're each a little bit different. They each have different personalities too. Now, to be eligible, you do have to be a for-profit business, which is kind of one of the exceptions to the rule for grants. A lot of times, if you're a 501c3 nonprofit, you might be eligible for foundation grants, but in this case, you actually have to be a for-profit and a small business according to SBA standards. Another requirement, you have what's called a principal investigator, is the person kind of managing the R&D effort. They have to be primarily employed with the small business. For SBIR, under STTR, there's a possibility they could stay at, let's say, a research university or research institution. And since this is federal money, taxpayer money, this R&D has to be done here in the US. I always like to show this. It's kind of interesting. You can be up to 500 employees, by SBA standards, but the majority of the clients we work with, I say a Tech Future group, are probably 1 to 5 employees. And, definitely under the 10 or 20 range. You see the biggest bar is that 2 to 9 range. So it's definitely small businesses who are winning most of these awards, and a lot of them are first-time awardees as well. The SBIR program, the way the $3 billion is doled out, is a 3-phase program. The first phase is what they call a feasibility study. So it's around demonstrating feasibility of your innovation X to do Y. So that could be just a report, it could be a simulation, it could be a benchtop prototype. And it's typically around a 6-month to 12-month effort. And depending on the agency, they each have their own budgets, but it's around $250,000 to $256,000 for a phase 1 effort. And then once you've gone through phase 1, you demonstrate feasibility, then you're eligible to apply for phase 2, which is where the real money's at. That's up to roughly $1 million. Some of the agencies like NIH is now up to 1.68 million, and that's a 2-year effort. So maybe you did a benchtop prototype in phase 1, and then phase 2 would be more of a field prototype. So you're testing the actual technology in the field. And then phase 3 is commercialization. So there's no direct money there in the SBIR STTR program. That's where you have to go out and find customers, investors, or partners to help you, get it to market. Now, it's possible some of the agencies could be your phase 3 customers. As mentioned, the granting versus contracting agencies. So some of the contracting agencies like the DoD or NASA, if you solve their problem in phase 1 and phase 2, the SBIR legislation also allows you to do what's called a sole source procurement. So they can actually contract with you to be a customer of yours. So they could be your phase 3 customer. Whereas like National Science Foundation or NIH, they're probably not going to buy anything from you. They'll fund the phase 1 and phase 2 effort, but then you have to go find your own customers and partners, investors to actually get it to market. So those are the 3 different phases. It is a competitive program. Odds of being funded overall about roughly 1 out of 10 phase 1 awards are funded. I think NSF is now around 1 in 8, and a lot of these are first-time proposers. Now, once you receive a phase 1 award, then you have about a 1 out of 2 to 1 out of 3 chance of getting phase 2 funding. So, if an agency funded 3 phase 1s, they might down select 1 phase 2. If they had 9 phase 1s, maybe they down selected 3 phase 2s or something. Phase 3, I don't have a whole lot of good data on tracking that, the commercialization, but that's where I've heard figures as low as like 1 in 20, which is only like 5%. That's where the program sort of falls down. That's the challenge, is to actually commercialize the technology. So that's where the programs like the Tech Futures Group, we can come in and assist you with that process as well. Now, just to explain a little bit of the differences between the SBIR and STTR programs. The Small Business Innovation Research Program, you can do 100% of the work if you wanted to, but you're allowed to subcontract out up to 1/3 or 33% in phase 1 and then up to 50% in phase 2. So if you want to subcontract with a research university or a research lab or even another company or consultants, you can do that. So you could subcontract with UC Berkeley or UC Davis here up in our region. And the other requirement too is the principal investigator has to be primarily employed with a small business, which means they can't work more than 49%, or it's like 19.6 hours per week. They base it on a 40-hour week, so they have to be primarily employed with your small business. So that can be a challenge, finding that PI. Typically, it's going to be maybe the CEO or CTO of the company that's going to be that PI. So the STTR program they have the same topics, same dollar amounts for phase 1 and phase 2. The agencies used to do separate solicitations, but now it's all one, same topics, same dollar amount. But under STTR, you as the small business are required to do a minimum 40% of the work by budget, but then you're mandated, required to subcontract out a minimum 30% to a research institution. So that could be a research university or a federal lab. And then the other 30% you can either keep or subcontract out for that final 30%. And the PI for STTR could potentially stay employed, stay at a research university, except for NSF doesn't allow that for their SBIR, STTR. They still have to be employed by the small business. So the awards always go to the small business, and then you would subcontract with a research university or a federal lab. Now, the first step in applying for a process is to find a topic to fit under. So you can't just submit anything out of the blue. You have to find a topic to submit under. So these 11 agencies, they do a solicitation between 1 to 4 times a year. So the small ones like higher education is once a year. And the bigger ones like NIH is 3 times a year. They have due dates of January 5th, April 5th, and typically around September 5th. DOD's 3 times a year. NSF just went from 2 to 4 times a year. So they have 4 submission windows. So the first step is to look and do some research. You can either go to, there's a website, sbir.gov, where you can do a keyword search of all 11 agencies, or you can go directly to the agency's SBIR website. Here's a screenshot of the SBIR page. This is the official site funded by the SBA. So you can do that keyword search of topics, and you can search both open topics and closed. So open are the ones that are currently on the street, the solicitation, they've released it, like a couple months to submit your proposal, they're accepting application. Closed are the ones that they've funded in the past, say last year or two. So you can always, I suggest searching both to see, what did they fund previously, because the topics, particularly with the granting agencies, may not change too much. So you can see, if they funded something last year, they might have it again on the upcoming solicitation. So that's the first step in the process, is to find a topic to fit under. Second step is to find locate the topic author or point of contact, and explain what you're doing and see if it's a fit for what they're looking to fund. Some of the agencies, they call it program director, like NSF, DOD, it's called a TPOC, technical point of contact. But usually you can try to find their phone number, email in the actual solicitation or at the SBIR website there. Now, with the contracting agencies, there's a window of opportunity when you can actually talk to them. So once they release it, then you can't talk to them maybe directly. It's due to the contracting kind of fairness rules, but you can, for example, the DoD, you can post questions to them, but then everybody sees the questions and everybody sees the answers to that. Whereas granting agencies, you could talk to them up to the day before submission. Some of the agencies like NSF is just implementing a new pitch process. So that's kind of your follow-up with them. And if you contact them, they'll say, well, just submit this pitch. So they used to say, send me a 2-page executive summary, but now they have this online form you have to fill out. It has 4 boxes. So there's a box for 500 words to describe the technology innovation, 500 words to describe your technical challenges or objectives and challenges, 250 words for the market opportunity, and 250 words for the company and team. So you submit that, program director will review it, and then you have to be invited to submit a full proposal. So a full proposal is a little more work. It's about 15 pages of writing, but it ends up being 40 or 50 pages by the time you have your budget and letters of support. In fact, here's an outline just to show you for NSF what goes into that 15 pages. You can see the outline with the elevator pitch and personalization and your company and team. And then you have resumes or bio sketches, and you have a 1-page budget. You're allowed 3 letters of support to submit as well. Similarly, here's one for NIH. You see, they call specific aims instead of research objectives, and they have a 6-page limit versus 15-page, so it's not quite as much space. But that's the process. Find a topic, talk to the topic author, and then you put your proposals together. And part of it you have to address is commercialization, because that's the ultimate goal. Purpose of the program is commercialize technologies. So in phase 1, you'll have to address this to some degree. You can talk about the market, who's the target market, the company and team, what the innovation is, who the competition is, the state of the art, and then what's your business model. And each agency is a little different. NSF in that 15 pages, in the pitch, you only had 250 words to talk about the market opportunity. In the 15 pages, they give you like 2 to 3 pages to describe that. Whereas like NIH, you only have 6 pages, so you might only have a couple paragraphs to talk about the market opportunity. Once you get to phase 2, then you have to do a little more. And like at NSF, it's a 15-page technical proposal and a 15-page commercialization. And then NIH, you have to do a 12-page commercialization plan. You also do a budget. You have to break down into direct costs, indirect, and fee or profit. And this is something we can help you with, because it's basically government accounting. Companies aren't familiar with indirect costs. You have to have you don't have a federally negotiated indirect rate. You have to propose one. You're also allowed to take up a 7% fee or profit. Suggest you take that full amount, because that's the most flexible money you're going to get. You can't, for example, spend money on patent expenses under direct costs, but you could under the 7% fee or profit. Or if it could be a buffer if you underestimate those direct costs. Some of the agencies at NSF allow you to charge like $10,000 to help you with accounting. Hire a CPA to help you out with that as well. So once you put together a proposal, then you have to submit it, and each agency a lot of them have their proprietary system. Many of them are using grants.gov. NSF uses research.gov, FastLane system. DoD has their own system. You can see the Department of Energy, so you have to set it up and register with those platforms. And then you also have to register with the SBA, just their company registry, and then you have to get a EIN number and a DUNS number. And then you have to set up what's called your SAM, System for Award Management. That's how you get paid. That you put your bank account information, your routing number, and then, the nice thing about SBIR, like you get most of the money up front. Like if you had a 256,000 NSF one, you get 256,000 minus 25,000 up front, and then they give you the final 25,000 at the final report. But these registrations can take a while, so don't wait to the last minute. Common reasons for decline is you didn't follow instructions. It tells you 1-inch margin, 11-point type, and 15 pages. Or it's not innovative. This is for cutting edge R&D. It's not for straightforward engineering work or app development. So you want to make sure that it's still unproven. There's technical questions you need to answer. You had a detailed work plan to what you're going to do with the money. And then you have to show that you have the team has the experience, both the technical experience to carry out the project and commercialization as well. Now, if you're declined, you can get feedback. There's usually, the granting agencies usually have 3 or 4 people, external reviewers, and you can get feedback, and then you can resubmit. In fact, I was declined the first time on mine. I took review panel comments, made some improvements, resubmitted, was successful the second time around. Just in conclusion, it's a great program. There's about $3 billion available each year, and you do have to focus on some sort of innovative R&D aspect that has some degree of risk, so it's not straightforward engineering work. The key to success is you do have to be responsive to the industry or the agency needs, so you need to talk to them, figure out whether there's a fit, and make sure you're responding to their need. And you do have to demonstrate that there's a commercial application for what you're developing. Have a detailed technical work plan, and then, of course, have a team that's capable of carrying it out. So that is an overview for the SBIR program. And I am now going to turn it over to David Walker. Let's stop sharing here, who is the director of the Shasta-Cascade SBDC here in Northern California, and he's going to be moderating our discussion panel here. And he's also had many years of experience with the SBIR program. He's formerly with the North Carolina SBTDC program, who did a lot of work there. So David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chuck. I've got a couple questions in the chat real quick for you.
Sure.
If all R&D needs to be done in America, are there restrictions on overseas manufacturing?
Well, in the SBIR funds cannot be used for marketing or manufacturing. Now, you can use it for R&D to prepare to manufacture, but once you get to the point where you're commercializing, the agencies, I think, would prefer you to manufacture it here in the U.S., but potentially, I guess, further on, once you're outside of the SBIR range, then you could use manufacturers. But the actual SBIR program cannot be used for manufacturing itself, or marketing efforts. It's got to be focused on R&D.
Right. And can we apply to phase 2 directly if we already have proof of concept and paying customers?
Yeah, there's 3 agencies that allow you to do that. Like NIH, you can do direct to phase 2. DoD, you can do direct to phase 2. I think it's the DOE as well. But you have to show that you've essentially done the same work as you would have done in phase 1, where you've demonstrated feasibility and you have some good preliminary data. But some of the agencies like National Science Foundation, you have to go through phase 1 first before you get to phase 2. But there are like NIH, DoD, you could potentially do that. And they also have what's called, NIH has a fast track program where you can apply for phase 1 and phase 2 at the same time as well. So that's another option.
Okay, thank you. That's what we have. And so I'll take it from here. I appreciate it, Chuck. Like I said, or like Chuck said, my name is David Walker. I'm director of the Shasta-Cascade Small Business Development Center. I have had some experience with SBIR. I've won some and I've lost a whole lot more. And in the last 8 or 10 years, I've also been part of doing some help with the National Science Foundation in reviewing SBIR proposals and giving them my perspective on them, which is a lot of fun, especially if you enjoy sitting in judgment of others. The questions, please keep the questions coming in the chat. If we can't get to them, I'm going to make a promise to you. If we can't get to the questions, we will get to them by email after this is over. We'll go through the questions we were unable to answer, and we'll answer to everybody by email. At this point, I'd like to introduce the panel, and if our panel would just tell us about your business and your SBIR experience for a few minutes, and then we'll get into some questions for you. Why don't we start with Sturat Berkowitz?
Hello, everyone. I, like Chuck, work with Tech Futures Group. I have my own small company. We've been around for about 17 years. We've done everything from phase 1 to multiple phase 3s. I focus in the company on Department of Defense, and that's usually what I help people with. It's a different environment than NSF. We've done 50 million plus in SBIR 1 through 3. So we've actually done production. We have things out on Navy surface ships. And also I help with accounting and things like that. My main message today is, you know, I bootstrapped an entire company using SBIR. You can too.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. Fatma?
Hi, I'm founder and CEO of startup Pheronym. We use pheromones to control agricultural pests, specifically from microscopic roundworms called nematodes, and we target the pest in the soil. I have experience both on writing and winning SBIR Phase 1 grants. I have been also on the other side as a reviewer for phase 2 SBIR grants. I have experience both with NSF and USDA SBIR programs.
Great. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Anthony?
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony. I love the SBIR program. I've started 2 companies initially funded with SBIRs, both in the broad food technology, food safety space. I have a very mixed record. I lost every grant I applied for, and then I subsequently won every single one of them because however humiliating the feedback was, I was able to actually take it to heart and resubmit, and my success rate was actually very high. I've gotten grants from NSF and NIH and a really bizarre grant from FDA, but I can talk about it some other time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see what we have in the chat. Let's see. Well, we'll start with this. I'm sorry to be a little bit scattered here. Getting to an SBIR grant, obviously you have to write a proposal. You have to follow the directions that are given when you write the proposal. Can you go through your process? How do you write the proposal? How do you prepare? How long does it take? What's involved? Give us some kind of an overview on that. Would one of you like to take that one?
I can start on the DoD side. Like Chuck said, there's a big difference between NSF and NIH where it's grants. They don't want anything particular from you. They're not going to buy anything from you. So it's a very different process than DoD. And in the DoD case, they're telling you what they want. And so the first place to start is to figure out what they want and where your technology fits in. That's really how you increase your odds from 10% to 50, 60%. I could talk more in detail about that whole process, but the main thing is to find a technology champion within the Navy, Air Force, Army, wherever you're working with, and they will help guide you to what the important applications are. In terms of time, I think I've written a successful proposal in about 10 hours, but that is probably as quick as you'll ever do it. I was also sick at the time and semi-delirious with a fever, but somehow it worked. I would say your first proposal, I would expect to spend, maybe Chuck can chime in, but I would say maybe 100 hours. So it is a big time commitment.
Chuck, do you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you could write one of these like in a week, but it takes time to pull together. Things like letters of support can take some time. So I would say to put together a good proposal, it's a 1 to 2 month process. I typically like to work with clients over a couple month process to put it together, and then getting those things like letters of support again can take a while too. But once you've written one too, you might be able to cut and paste things from like commercialization, but the R&D plan is going to be unique. But yeah, I would say plan on a month or 2 to do a good proposal.
Okay, good.
I can speak some more.
Yeah,
I totally agree with Chuck. I would say 2 to 3 months, because if you're the first time, even government registration, SAM, SBA registrations takes about 2 months. And these are not related to actually your own proposal, the technical R&D. And my first one took actually 2 to 3 months from scratch. And it was the first time I was writing an SBIR grant. And the best way, I would say my first 2 attempts were fail, but the second time when I applied for those grants, that funding, I would say definitely look at request for application. They do have guidelines for both USDA and NSF. And I followed those guidelines. And the second time when I applied to NSF, and that was my second grant, the first time I applied, it got funding. So definitely follow the guidelines for R&D. NSF was a lot more, they have more emphasis on the commercialization, that you have to have some sort of customer interview, primary market research. That, at least for my grants, it made a big difference.
Okay. Good.
I just want to offer a very practical comment here, very practical suggestion. Like Fatma said, many times I got stuck into these various sums and this and that and so on and so forth. One thing I'll tell everyone, and most people think, government customer service, right? Good luck with that. These agencies, they have amazing customer service. If you pick up the phone, they will answer in seconds and they're going to solve your problem. So don't sweat it. If you have a problem, just call them. Guaranteed, they will help you solve your problem. I've been amazed by the customer service. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. That's great. I have a interesting question in the chat here that I kind of dovetails into that. And I don't mean to throw you guys a curveball, but here it comes. What was the most surprising feedback you received on a failed proposal, and how did you address it?
I can start with that. The most surprising feedback that I got is when I thought I had full clarity about what I was proposing. The feedback was that I was completely confused, that I had no idea what I was talking about, and that was very, very. I don't know how to call it. It didn't make me feel very good. But when I took a step back and I looked at it from a reviewer's perspective, it was clear I was not conveying my message. My message was all muddled. So I sucked it up and I did it again and I won the grant the second time.
This doesn't exactly answer that question, but I think one key thing to take into account is you win the proposal on the first page. Pages 2 through whatever, you can only lose it. So make sure that your beginning part is very concise and really hits your main points, because reviewers are getting lots of proposals and they don't have time to, they're not going to read page number 15 and go, oh, now I get it. Now I'm definitely going to approve this. So spend a lot of time on the beginning part.
I agree with Stuart that the abstract was the most important thing. I took a couple of SBIR short courses like that, and it was suggested that if you didn't comments your reviewer in the first 2 sentences of the abstract, you lost it. So we made sure that we had a compelling case in the abstract. I must say one other thing. We also had somebody who's not familiar to our project read it, and Chuck's actually feedback was really great. And he told me with my NSF proposal, which got funded the first time when we applied, it says, put some pictures. And when I was on being a reviewer, I realized sometimes reviewers might have very small number of days to review several proposals. If it doesn't have pictures and the message is very simple to understand, it's really hard. And the more pictures you have, you can visualize your technology, the better chance you have.
I second that. Chuck has been an amazing resource for me. So thanks again, Chuck.
That's great. Yeah. Chuck and Stuart are both, they're like the SBIR kings around here.
When you have a 15-page text-heavy document, that people aren't going to read 15 pages of text. So if you can put 1 to 2 graphics, whether it's charts, figures, pictures, diagrams, I think helps. And I mentioned I was turned down the first time. My second proposal, I came up with this overall picture of my concept, and I think that's why I won the second time, was having that, explaining what it was visually. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words too. You get things across a lot faster.
Yeah. We mentioned letters of support a little bit ago. Who would qualify for letters of support? That's one of the questions in the chat. Where would you, what's the best source for a letter of support?
I have gotten letters of support, and I usually try to get letters of support from people who are potentially users or customers. And I try not to put them in a position where they feel they're making a future commitment. I just ask them to simply state that they see that there's a problem and there is a need, and if I'm able to deliver, what I promise, that they would be willing to try it out and test it. So it's a fairly simple, straightforward message, something that they feel comfortable doing. It does not put them in a comfortable position of endorsing necessarily what I do. But hey, if they can endorse it, why not? Right? But I don't push them for that.
Okay. Let me address one thing, a little bit off topic. We are going to be providing a link to this recording, and you'll be getting contact information. You'll be getting at least mine and Tech Futures Group and everything. So we will be providing that to all the registrants after this. And just to let you know, if you don't hear me asking your question, there are dozens of questions in the chat. So we will answer all of them by email if we don't get them here. Let's see. Are there any restrictions on the number? This is a good one for Chuck or Stuart. Are there any restrictions on the number of grants or contracts a company can submit for, especially on related but different market needs?
I guess I can start out there. I mean, some of the agencies like NSF used to allow you to submit 2 proposals at one time. You had to have a different PI. You can only submit 1 proposal per submission window and 2 project pitch per submission window. Now you can submit proposals to more than 1 agency. So you can submit to NSF, DOE, or NIH, and even be funded. We have clients that have 2 or 3 phase 1s with different agencies and maybe a phase 2. You just can't be funded for the same work by both. So they don't want you double dipping. And whenever you do submit your proposals, there's a section in the application called current and pending support. You have to list all the applications you've submitted, like to other agencies, and then a current one, so they don't want you double dipping. And then the only other restriction too, once you get to a certain level, and maybe Stuart can address this too, they don't want to have you be an SBIR mill where you get 20, 30 SBIRs and never commercialize anything. They start looking at your commercialization success, getting from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. So.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Like Chuck said, there's a part where you actually sign that you haven't submitted a substantially the same proposal anywhere else. And that's really about double dipping. So everybody sort of says, oh, well, all of my proposals need to be totally different. But if you're a technical person, you know there are many aspects of a problem. And as a small company, you have to be focused. You can't afford to be distracted. So the more funding you can get to basically solve the core problem of your company, the better. So definitely don't be afraid to submit in multiple places around that core technology, because you're not going to have a successful company off of 1 phase 1 and 1 phase 2. You're not going to be able to fund enough people to really make progress. So I would try to eventually get to maybe 2 or 3 phase 2s and hopefully get to a phase 3 eventually.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat relating to to what you've said here about where to submitting to multiple agencies. For instance, there's one about they're working on climate change, so should they apply to the EPA or the National Science Foundation? And I can tell you that if there's a specific topic under an agency that fits your concept, you definitely can apply there. The National Science Foundation, since they kind of don't really have a special area, they pretty much will do anything. If it's innovative, if there's technical risk and a market opportunity, they'll entertain a proposal. So, if you had to play favorites, they're my favorite. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, so I may say this again later, but if there's one thing to remember of what I say this whole time, is that once you get a phase 1 anywhere, you can then get a phase 2 anywhere else. So don't worry about, should I do this agency or that agency? Get a phase 1. You can get a phase 1 from NSF, and the Army can put a phase 2 against that, because there's the federal acquisition regulations, which says everything needs to be competed for the government, whether it's a wrench or your research project. And by getting that phase 1, you have competed. So any phase 2s, and you can get multiple phase 2s on a phase 1, and you can get it for multiple agencies. You can build an entire company off of one phase one if you really, do something that people really want.
Another consideration would be just the timing. The solicitations don't line up timing-wise. So at NSF, you have 4 opportunities anytime during the year to submit, whereas some of the small agencies like EPA or something might only have once or twice a year. So depending on where you are in the year, maybe you submit to EPA first and then NSF, but maybe it's a ways off before the EPA one's going to come up, then you might want to go ahead and submit to NSF first.
Okay. How, especially for Anthony and Fatma, can you describe your relationship with your program manager, the person that oversees your phase 1 and phase 2 award? How closely do they watch the spending, or how does that mechanism work? What's the relationship like, and how important is it, would you say?
For me, it has varied. When I said earlier that I had a bizarre FDA grant, which actually went to phase 2, I never knew who the program manager was. I don't know that there was one on the record. It was a very bizarre situation. With NIH, I had a good relationship. He actually helped me through, the phase 2. He the first time I submitted for a phase 2, it was rejected, and then he came back and he actually invited me to apply again, and he helped me through the process. So that was because he thought that there was value in what we're proposing. It's just that we had not done a very good proposal actually. With NSF, a little bit mixed. They like to have some contact, but mainly they don't look a lot into the budget to the extent that you've met the requirements of the submission, and if you dot the I's and cross the T's, they don't really get too much in the weeds. At least that's been my experience.
So for me, with USDA, I didn't really have much interaction with the program director, except for, hey, you got funding, and that was really great, the phone call. So he made my day. For NSF, it was a little different because we started during the COVID, and we did supplemental. So I had a lot more interaction with the program director. And we had a supplemental grant for the customer discovery. We joined as NSF I-Corp's national program, where we did 100 customer discovery interviews. So he had to approve that, and we got in touch for that. Due to COVID, we had to get extensions. So I provided an update what was going on with the proposal, and we were more likely to ask for an extension. And he said, well, when you do the application, let me know, because he has to approve. So we're a lot more in touch with the program director with the NSF. For the budget wise, NSF was really on top, I would say. Right at the beginning, they explained the budget requirements, where we spent. Basically, we had a lecture. But they don't necessarily have a tight control. The only thing we were told is we could actually get the funding anytime we could, except for the last $25,000, where we have to complete and provide them everything. One thing they suggested, we could draw all of the funds if we wanted to right at the beginning, but because it's close to the tax season, so if we have any extra money, then government would tax us. So if we draw a smaller amount, and as we are spending, that way we wouldn't get taxed, because we don't really have the money in our bank account sitting. So that would be the only thing I would say.
There's another interesting question in the chat that I think I'd like to tackle on my own. Do A-tier VCs fund companies for commercialization? And I'm also told that the Tech Futures link didn't work. So you'll be getting a Tech Futures link in the email, and I'll try to put one in here again, or maybe you could do it, Joe, if you can. Anyway, if you were to approach a VC for funding, maybe your chances, maybe they'll see 1,000 business plans, and maybe they'll fund 5 or 7 or 10. One of the program directors at the National Science Foundation told me that 1 in 9 of his phase 2 awardees were getting angel or VC funding after the completion of the phase 2. It does happen. And I can give you an example. It's one of my favorites. It was a National Science Foundation SBIR Phase 1 and Phase 2 awardee named Blue River Technology. You can look them up. They had a really cool ag-related technology that was funded by the National Science Foundation. And they subsequently were purchased by John Deere for $305 million. You know, that's an outside, doesn't happen to everybody, but it's an example. Having a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 from the NSF is a huge validator of your technology and your business. Any other comments on that idea from you guys? Have you seen VC or angel capital related to that, to SBIR?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Not only have I acted as an angel and participated in seed rounds on a few companies and been on a couple of company boards. The main thing is you're not really going to deal with a VC. You're probably going to deal with a seed or angel group, and they just don't have the capability to do technical due diligence. So they're really now looking at SBIR as their technical due diligence, that this isn't some crazy idea, that there is something there.
With the NSF, it actually creates really credibility even for other sources of funding. We did get angel funding after our NSF Phase 1 grant. Recently, actually. We also got into another non-dilutive funding. So we did mention to them we had NSF funding and customer discovery. So that had a huge help. This non-dilutive funding was Activate Berkeley funding that gives us access to Lawrence Berkeley Lab for scale-up manufacturing of the nematode pheromones. So it does have a huge help and credibility on the scientific due diligence, like Stuart mentioned.
I'd like to mention too that some of the agencies have what they call Phase 2B funding, where they'll match a third-party investor, like NSF will match a third-party investor, like an angel investor or VC even, or even state funding in some cases, up to $1 million, and they match 50 cents on the dollar. So if you had an angel investor putting up $1 million, they could give you another $500,000 in Phase 2B funding, and they'll extend your Phase 2 grant by another 2 years. So it could be incentive. You can say, to the investor, I can leverage your money with another $500,000 in non-dilutive funding.
One of the things that I have been told, at least for NSF, is they would hesitate to grant a Phase 2 if that is the sole source of funding for the company. So they want to see a company that has other source of funding, whether it's revenue or other investments. So, that's a bridge that sometimes we need to cross, not at the time of the application, at the time of the award. So if you assume that it takes maybe 6 to 9 months between the time you apply for a Phase 2 and the time you actually receive the grant, that's a time to try to raise some money or generate some revenue so that when it's granted, you can actually address that part.
Okay. The typical, answering just a couple of the questions here, typical fund size for a Phase 1 program, it depends on the agency. It could be anywhere from about 100,000 to about 256,000. Let's see. What are some of the, Fatma, you said that you've done some SBIR reviews. What have you seen that has really made the review, made a proposal stand out? What is it you look for when you're evaluating a proposal?
The main thing was whether the company de-risked the project or that proof of concept, because Phase 1 is for the proof of concept. Did they actually de-risk? Did they provide the promise that they said they were going to do? And in the Phase 2, basically it's extending from there. That was basically the main decision maker. And SBIR is a proof of concept, and it's a risky thing, and that doesn't happen always.
Right.
And the second part is the commercialization, and did they actually do market research? Is there a need? But the main thing is, did they de-risk what they promised in the phase one? Did they do that and show it?
Yeah. One of the things I've seen in my reviews for proposals is a failure. It was mentioned before, a failure to follow the outline, and an assumption that's born out of arrogance, I suppose, an assumption that your idea is so great, that you have this intellectual merit, this idea is wonderful, and the program director is going to be enamored with the idea, and he's not going to care that much about, you know, other parts of the proposal that may be weaker. And I've seen that a lot, and it's a very common reason for rejection, at least that I've seen, where the task plan, what you're going to do, what you're going to accomplish, how you're going to spend the money isn't clearly defined. And so it's important that that happen. It's important that that you're as specific as you can be in your task plan, recognizing its research. So things are going to go off the rails here and there, and the agency is going to expect that, but they want to see a task plan, and they want to see a plan that where you're anticipating what those things might be and how you might address those. This is interesting here. How long did it take to get your first grant win from when you started the registration to going through the process and the rejections?
For me, it was 1 year.
Any other comments on that one?
I'm just comment. Just no. Go ahead. That. Yeah.
With NSF, they actually are very fast. We applied in 2019 December, and we got the first interaction with them in February. And due to COVID, things were slow, but we had access to funds in May 15 till, I think, between May 15 to June. I would say 6 months later, we had access to funds.
Wow.
But I think they can be a little faster too. With USDA, it was a year.
Okay. All right. Well, we're at, according to Bill Gates, we're at 9:58, almost 9:59 now. Let me tell you, I'm saving the chat. I've got all of your questions. There's a lot of very specific ones, and we'll get to all of them, and we'll get to them by email. Maybe we should have made this longer. But we will be sending you a link to this recording. We'll be sending you copies of the slides. We'll be sending you links to my contact info, Chuck, Stuart's, Edgar Cerrone. He's the Associate Director for the Tech Futures Group, so that you're able to contact us, ask questions, and get some help with your SBIR work. So are there any parting thoughts any of you might have, other than goodbye and thank you?
It's worth it. It's worth the effort. It's great validation. It's free money. I think it's totally worth it.
Okay. I am being reminded by Emily, without Emily. Okay, you know what? You're going to get, I messed up. Guess what? I messed up. It's a big news flash. You'll also be getting a survey link. There'll be a link to a SurveyMonkey site, and we would appreciate your filling out the survey. Tell us what you think. It's how we improve. It's how we, and it also dictates the kind of webinars we do, the kind of workshops we do. It gets responses from you guys. So please be frank, please be blunt. We have thick skin, we can take it. We'll be sending you that survey link, and all that other information will come out in the next couple of days. So thanks a lot, appreciate it. Take care, we'll end it now. Thanks.